Okay, welcome to another tutorial. For this tutorial, we're going to look on how to render animations. So, we're going to render our animation now. And as you can see, I have multiple cameras created here, but only one of them is my animation camera. I have named it animation camera so I don't get confused with the different cameras in my scene. So I'm going to switch to my animation camera. And if I hit play, that's what my animation camera will do. Now, to save an animation, I'm going to bring up my render settings, and the key difference with an image and an animation is for an animation we're rendering multiple frames, not a single frame, right? So this is the key difference here. So single frame for a single image, but for animation we're going to be either rendering the entire time segment or we'll be rendering between a range of frames, right? So we're going to choose this option, which is to render the entire 900 frame segment. Okay, so we're going to choose that. Then we're also going to choose to save our file. Very important, the file needs somewhere to go after it's rendered. So I'm going to choose the desktop here, and I'm going to render this to a folder called animation. So let's call it a name. I'm just going to call it animation camera. And we did speak about this in class. We're not going to save it as an AVI file, as if there is a catastrophic failure during the AVI creation, you will lose the entire AVI file. Hence, we want to create a JPEG sequence, called a JPEG sequence, where it will render every frame as an individual JPEG. So I'm going to choose save. Alright, now what really matters is how long will it take to render 900 frames. Now that's a pretty simple calculation. If it takes X time to render one frame, then you just need to multiply it by 900. So let's look at our resolution here. I'm rendering at 1280 by 720, right? And if I take a render image now by clicking render, make this smaller so it fits in the screen. So I'm rendering now at 1280 by 720, and most of my settings that you see here are pretty much set to low, draft, low, low, and minimum, right? With these settings and this resolution, along with your computer specs, my current computer is an i7, so I have 8 cores, there we go, that is available to me. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now notice while rendering, all my cores are actually maxed out at 100%. Now this is important because what really matters with rendering is the amount of cores you have. The more cores you have, the quicker it will render. Now how mental ray works, and if I zoom in here, notice that you see these boxes that looks like little ants that's crawling around, and what it's actually doing is rendering a chunk per time. Now every square that you see here represents a processor that you have. Hence, the more squares you have, the quicker the image will render, but that means the more processors that you will have. If you only have 2 processors, then that would mean you would only see 2 squares in your render scene. Very important fact with render time. So notice here my rendering is pretty much almost done, and after every render Max will actually tell you how long it took to render a single frame. So as it is finishing up about right now, it has now moved to frame 2. Now it took and I can see here, and I see here where the last frame time took 2 minutes 18 seconds. Let's round that off to 2.5 minutes. So if I bring up my calculator, 2.5 minutes multiplied by 900 frames will give you 2200 minutes. Now let's divide that by 60 to get that time in hours. So it would take me 37 hours to render this 900 frame animation on my i7 8-core computer at the stipulated resolution with these draft settings. So you can see right away that it's going to take a while, and granted this is a rough number, so it may take 30 or 40 hours, but this is a rough idea of how long it would take. Hence why we want to use the render farm when rendering. Now this process that you saw me do, and I'm just going to cancel the rendering here, this would be done on the render farm. Hence it wouldn't tie up your machine for a whopping 37 hours. Now the only difference with clicking render on the render farm is that on the farm, instead of clicking render, you would actually go to this drop down box here and choose submit to network rendering. Now once you click that, then it will actually use all the computers of the farm. Hence if we're using 10 computers, it would be 10 times 8 cores, and that's a pretty powerful way to render. Now the additional thing is adjusting these slider bars will greatly decrease your render time. Okay, so for our purpose, I'm going to set an animation to render, and then I will show you how to stitch that animation together. Now when you finish rendering your frames, you will end up with a folder that has many images. For example, so I saved all my frames to the animation folder. Hence I will have many images, each image representing a single frame. So if I open one image and I go between it, you will see where every image shows a different part of the animation. Now granted, this resolution is extremely low for the purpose of this tutorial. I'll be showing you now how to stitch the images into an AVI file. Now to do that, you will need to go to, let me just get this out of the way, you will need to go to rendering, compare media in RAM player, you will see this dialog box pop up. Now what you need to do is this RAM player has two channels, channel A, channel B. That currently is irrelevant. You can use any channel to load in your images. So I'm going to use channel A and choose open. Then I'm going to go to my desktop and go to the animation folder. Select the first image and notice that the RAM player will detect that it is a image sequence. From what you see here, this sequence checkbox is important because this tells the RAM player that it's a sequence of images that you'll be using. Okay, so now that you've done that, all you need to do is to select the first one and choose open, and notice that it will detect that I have only rendered 292 frames. For you this may be 900. I'm going to click OK, and it detects my resolution and everything. I choose OK again. Now once it does that, the RAM player is actually stitching the video together for you, and it's actually stitching it in your RAM, meaning your memory. So if you have a very small amount of RAM, this process might be problematic. However, to stitch an animation of this length, it will require kilobytes of RAM, so it is highly unlikely that you will be running out of memory to stitch this animation. Now if I hit play now, you see where you can preview your animation in the RAM player. Now all you need to do now is to go to the save icon, and now you save it as an AVI file. So I will call this animation 3DM. Okay. Now if I go to my desktop, you will notice that I have a file called animation 3DM, and it plays in any typical media player. So that's how you stitch your frames. Now the final step after stitching your frames is you need to use a video editing program to apply your name, your ID number when submitting the file. This is important. This is similar to you having a printed image. You need to have the title and the date, what assignment you're doing, and so forth. So to do that, what I suggest you use is Windows Movie Maker. Now Windows Movie Maker is a free Windows application. It's super simple, and it will allow you to place text on your video. Now to get Windows Movie Maker, if it's not already installed on the computers in the lab, you simply go to windows-movie-maker.org. This is a website that actually stores the different versions of Movie Maker, as it is no longer supported by Microsoft. So you go to this website, windows-movie-maker.org, and you're going to download Windows Movie Maker. It will work on all versions of Windows, or it should rather. Hit the download button, it will download for you, and then you install it. Now once you install it, and I'm going to open it, this is what it will look like. Very simple application, and what you do is drag and drop your video over here, and it will be edited in this window here. So I'm going to do that now. I'm going to browse to my desktop. Here is that animation file that I created. I'm going to drag it into Movie Maker, and Movie Maker will preview the file for me. So what I want to do is to go to, let's make this a little wider for you. I want to go to add a title, and the title would be maybe my name, Brian Williams, ID number, and the title, maybe the assignment, major project. This is just like using any word editor. I can change the size of my font and so forth. Alright, so notice now it will actually play this at the beginning. You can have more than one titles if you want, and you can even change the animation so you get, you know, nice effects. You can also add, if I go back to this picture here, I can add caption, meaning I want to put a text here. And for those of you who want to really have a wow factor, you can also add music to the animation. So if I have my music here, so I'm going to drag my music here, and it will actually play this music with the animation. So I can hit play, There are some other cool things you can do, for example add transitions and other effects, but for the main part what is really required is that I need to know who submitted the video, and for cases where it would be shown in other cases we need to have that ownership information there. Now once you do that, you're going to save the project by going to save movie, and you're going to save it in a file format. The one I suggest is recommended for this project. You can just use that. It's going to save it as a WMV file, and I'm going to call this 3DM major project animation. It will actually save the file, and it will also compress it, which is important, as you might realize that the AVI file is going to be quite big. So here it has created a WMV file, and it's only 9 megabytes, and this is your final file that you will submit for your project. Okay, so that concludes this tutorial of how to render your images and save your movie file and upload.